All right, ready for a deep dive. Today we're looking at something you might not expect. Ancient Greek philosophy and modern psychology. We're going to see how those two, even though they're separated by centuries, actually have some really interesting things in common.
It really is interesting how those ideas from way back then, with the ancient Greeks, kind of pop up in psychology today.
Yeah, it's like we're following this hidden trail of ideas. And our guide, Alfred Adler, you've heard of him, right? One of the big names in psychology, Freud, Jung, Adler.
Yeah, and yet he doesn't get talked about as much as the others. So we're going to try to figure out why his ideas are still important today, in the modern world.
So to set the scene, I like to think of us talking to this like wise old philosopher, someone who has spent their whole life studying the works of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle.
That's a lot of philosophy.
Yeah, that's some heavy stuff.
It really gives them a unique point of view. I mean, they're coming at this with like a deep understanding of human nature, the kind of things that the Greeks were thinking about all those years ago.
Okay, so then we have Alfred Adler, an Austrian psychiatrist. He developed something called individual psychology. And I know some people might be thinking, oh, is Adler like a student of Freud? But that's actually not true.
Yeah, they were both working around the same time in the same field, but their ideas kind of went in different directions.
So it wasn't like a teacher-student relationship?
Right. More like they were both really smart and looking at the same problems, but in different ways.
They were definitely equals. Two, like, giants of psychology, each one pushing the boundaries of the field.
It's interesting how ideas develop over time. It's not just a straight line. It's more like ideas bouncing off of each other and sometimes merging together.
Okay, so here's where Adler's story gets interesting. He believed that his ideas would, like, become so normal, so much a part of how we think, that we would forget where they came from.
Almost like he predicted he wouldn't be famous. But if you really pay attention, his ideas are everywhere. Like Dale Carnegie, the guy who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, that book has sold like a zillion copies.
It's practically required reading for, like, anyone who wants to be successful.
Right. And Carnegie was a big fan of Adler. He even called him like a great psychologist.
Oh, so Carnegie was definitely influenced by Adler.
If you look closely at like How to Win Friends, you see so much of Adler in there. All that stuff about understanding other people, working together, building real connections, that's all very Adlerian.
It's like Adler's ideas snuck into our culture and became the standard advice. And it's not just Carnegie. What about Stephen Covey, the guy who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Absolutely. Covey's ideas about responsibility, finding solutions where everyone wins, really understanding other people, these are all very much in line with what Adler was saying.
So it seems like Adler's ideas are all over the place. Even if we don't realize it, it's kind of amazing.
It really is. And the interesting thing is that Adler was often way ahead of his time. He was talking about things that, like, psychology as a field was just starting to figure out.
Okay, so now I gotta know. What were these radical ideas that had such a big impact back then and still resonate today?
That's the big question, isn't it? But before we jump into all the specifics of, like, Adlerian psychology, let's go back to our philosopher for a second.
Because they have this really unique perspective, right?
Exactly. They see Adler as more than just a psychologist. It's like he was continuing a line of thought that goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks.
Wait, are you saying that, like, the ancient Greeks were already thinking about the things that Adler would write about centuries later?
Well, it's not like they had all the same exact ideas, but there are some similarities. They both were really interested in what makes people tick, why we do the things we do, how to live a good life.
Whoa, okay, now my mind is blown. It's like we're finding all these hidden connections between two totally different worlds.
And that's where it gets really exciting.
Okay, I'm all ears. I'm ready to dive in.
So let's talk about some of Adler's big ideas. One that really stands out is this concept of the life task.
Life task. It sounds kind of serious. What did he mean by that?
Well, Adler believed that, we all have this like basic challenge in life, right? To figure out our place in the world, contribute to society, do something meaningful, and ultimately like create a life that has purpose.
So it's not just about being happy or successful, like in the traditional sense.
Yeah, it's bigger than that. It's about realizing that we're all connected and understanding like our lives have a purpose beyond just ourselves.
I'm seeing how this connects to the Greek idea of the polis, the community being such an important part of life.
Exactly. It's amazing how these ideas keep popping up across time. But going back to the life task, how do we actually figure out what ours is? Like, is there a set of instructions or something?
Yeah, where's the manual?
That's the journey, right? Adler thought We discover our life task through like our experiences, our relationships, the things we struggle with, even our passions. It's not like predetermined. It's something we actively create through the choices we make.
So it's more about self-discovery and growth than like following a path that's already laid out for us.
Exactly. And this is where we see that Greek philosophy connection again. Remember Socrates, know thyself. Well, Adler's idea of the life task is like a modern way of saying that. It's about going on that journey of self-knowledge.
Okay, now I see the link. It's about figuring out our values, what motivates us, what really gives our lives meaning. But how does Adler connect this to psychology?
This is where it gets really interesting. Adler believed that to find our life task, we got to overcome feelings of inferiority.
Feelings of inferiority? Does he mean like having low self-esteem?
Yeah, but he saw those feelings not as like a bad thing, but as just part of being human. We all start out feeling small and dependent.
Right.
And that experience, it kind of shapes our desire to grow, learn, master new skills.
That's an interesting way to look at it. So those feelings of like not being good enough can actually push us to become better and find our place in the world.
Exactly. It's about using that energy in a positive way. Okay, now this next part is where Adler's ideas get really powerful. He believed that the way we understand our experiences, especially those early childhood experiences, shapes our worldview and our goals in life.
So you're saying our childhood has a lasting impact on how we see ourselves and what we want to achieve, even if we don't realize it.
Exactly. And it's not just about what happened, but how we made sense of it. Two people can have similar childhoods, but they might interpret those experiences totally differently.
Right. It's not about dwelling on the past. It's about understanding how those experiences might be affecting us now.
Exactly. And that leads us to another important idea in Adlerian psychology, social interest.
Social interest. So is this just like being outgoing and having a lot of friends?
Not quite. Adler believed that humans are, like, naturally social. Our well-being is tied to our connections with other people. Social interest is about feeling like you belong, contributing to something bigger than yourself, having empathy for other people.
So it's about recognizing that we're part of a community, a society. Our lives are connected to the lives of everyone else.
Precisely. And this goes back to the idea of the life task. Adler believed that finding our place in the world isn't just about feeling good about ourselves. It's about contributing to the well-being of others.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of this fits together. It's like a whole new way of looking at life, relationships, our purpose, everything.
And that's the cool thing about Adlerian psychology. It gives us a way to understand ourselves and other people that's both insightful and empowering.
I do have a question, though. If Adler's ideas are so insightful, why isn't he as well known as Freud or Jung?
It's a good question. And there are probably a few reasons. One theory is that Adler was just too ahead of his time. His ideas were different from what most psychologists believed back then. They were really focused on mental illness and the unconscious mind.
So he was presenting this more positive, more well-rounded view of human nature that maybe people weren't ready for.
Yeah. And that could be why his ideas weren't widely accepted at first. Another reason might be that Adler himself wasn't interested in becoming famous. He seemed more focused on his ideas and how they could help people than on building a name for himself.
So he wanted to spread the ideas, not become like a celebrity psychologist.
That seems to be the case. And remember, he even said that people might forget his name, but his ideas would live on.
Which is kind of what happened. His ideas are all over the place now, but people don't always know where they came from. It's like his ideas kind of took on a life of their own.
Right. And that brings us back to now. Even though maybe not everyone knows his name, Adler's ideas are super relevant today. In a world that often feels divided, his emphasis on social interest, purpose, helping others, it feels like what we need right now.
It's like he's giving us a guide for navigating this crazy modern world, a way to find meaning when things feel overwhelming.
Exactly. And that's why it's so rewarding to explore Adler's work. It's not just about learning about the past, it's about finding insights that can help us live better lives right now.
Okay, I'm definitely having that aha moment. I'm looking at the world, my own life, in a totally new way.
That's awesome. But to take this even further, let's bring our philosopher back in. They see a deep connection between Adler and the ancient Greeks.
They see Adlerian psychology as like a modern version of those timeless philosophical ideas, right?
Precisely. And that perspective gives us even more understanding of Adler. It's like we're seeing his ideas through the lens of all this wisdom that's been around for centuries.
So it's not just about Adler, it's about how his work fits into this long tradition of thinking about human nature. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Huh.
We're not just looking at one person's ideas. We're tapping into this huge intellectual history that still influences how we understand ourselves and the world around us.
Wow, this is so much more than a history lesson. It's like a whole new way of thinking about life, purpose, what it means to be human.
And we're just getting started. There's still so much more to discover within Adlerian psychology. But for now, let's wrap things up by looking at some of the key connections back to the ancient Greeks.
Sounds good. I'm ready to hear how all these ideas connect. Okay, so we've talked about some of Adler's big ideas, like the life task, those feelings of inferiority, and the importance of social interest. But how does our philosopher friend connect these ideas back to the ancient Greeks?
Well, if you think about the Greek philosophers, especially someone like Aristotle, they were really focused on the idea of virtue, living a good life. They thought true happiness, true fulfillment came from developing virtues like courage, wisdom, justice, temperance.
So it was about having a strong character, living according to ethical principles.
Exactly. And for the Greeks, it wasn't just about individual happiness. It was about being a good citizen, contributing to the community as a whole. The polis, the community, was like central to their idea of a good life.
I see the connection to Adler now. His idea of social interest really fits with that Greek idea of civic virtue, working for the common good. It's not just about me, it's about us.
Exactly. It's almost like Adler is giving us like a modern psychological way of understanding these ancient philosophical ideas. He's saying that our drive to overcome those feelings of inferiority, to find our place, it's all connected to our desire to connect with others and contribute to something bigger.
So it's not just about improving ourselves, it's about using our unique talents and skills to make a positive difference in the world, a much bigger vision.
Right. And this leads to another interesting parallel between Adler and the Greeks. Both of them really emphasize the importance of understanding our own motivations. Why do we do the things we do? What are the real reasons behind our behavior?
It's like that Socratic idea, the unexamined life is not worth living. We need to look inward, understand our values, be aware of the choices we're making.
Exactly. And Adler took this even further. He said that we often tell ourselves stories about ourselves, about the world, that might not be totally true. He called these life lies.
Life lies. Wow. So we might be fooling ourselves, creating these convenient little stories to protect our egos or avoid facing hard truths.
Exactly. And those life lies can prevent us from reaching our full potential, from living in a way that's true to our values. That's like we're putting up these roadblocks to our own growth.
So how do we get past these self-imposed limitations? How do we face those life lies?
That's where therapy comes in, and real honest self-reflection. Adler thought that by carefully looking at our beliefs and motivations, we can gain a much clearer understanding of ourselves and start making better choices. It's about becoming aware of those unconscious patterns that might be influencing our behavior.
Like taking off those rose-colored glasses and seeing ourselves in the world for what they really are, even if it's kind of uncomfortable at first.
Exactly. This process of self-discovery can be tough, but it's also freeing. It allows us to let go of those limiting beliefs and move toward a more authentic way of being.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. But what does it all mean for our listeners? How can they use these ideas in their own lives? It all seems very big picture, but how do we make it practical?
That's the key question. I think there are a few main takeaways. First, understanding this idea of the life task can help us get clear about our goals and priorities. It's about asking, what kind of contribution do I want to make? What kind of impact do I want to have?
So we have to think beyond just ourselves and consider how our actions affect others.
Exactly. Second, recognizing how important social interest is can help us build stronger, more meaningful relationships. It's about shifting from me to we, developing empathy, compassion, a genuine desire to connect.
It's like that saying, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others.
That's perfect. And finally, becoming aware of those life lies we might be telling ourselves. This could be a huge step in breaking free from patterns that are holding us back. It's about being brutally honest with ourselves and making choices that reflect our values, even when it's tough.
This has been such an amazing journey. We've explored ancient Greek philosophy, modern psychology, and found these incredible links between them.
And it's striking how relevant these ideas still are, even though they're so old. They offer this timeless wisdom that can guide us through the challenges of modern life and help us find meaning when things feel uncertain.
I'm definitely leaving this conversation feeling more purposeful and with a much deeper understanding of myself and what it means to be human.
That's fantastic. And that's really what we were hoping for, to spark curiosity, encourage self-reflection, help each of us live a more fulfilling life.
Well, mission accomplished. I feel inspired and ready to put these ideas into practice.
That's great. As you continue on this path, I'll leave you with a final question, inspired by Adler. What would your life be like if you lived as if everyone you met mattered as much as you do?
That's a really powerful question. It challenges us to be more compassionate and see how interconnected we all are.
It does. And as you think about that, remember, you have the power to create a life that is both meaningful to you and makes a positive difference in the world.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive. It's been an honor, and I know our listeners are going to be buzzing with new insights and inspiration.
The pleasure was all mine. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to live a life that's authentic and impactful.